Service. LBC weather. Scattered showers in the far north and east, cold and sunny elsewhere, a high of 8 degrees. From Global's newsroom, for LBC, I'm Philip Chrysikos.
3 weeks we've been camped up here, just for one picture of a Himalayan snow leopard. Shh, what's that? Look, there, take the picture, quick.
I need to go.
What?
I've got to, sorry.
But this is our only chance.
It'll be here when I'm back.
No, you've scared it off.
It's the Land Rover Black event and I can't miss it.
The Land Rover Black event, worth changing your plans for. Exclusive offers available from the 29th of November to the 1st of December. Search Land Rover Black event. Land Rover, above and beyond.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good morning. It's 3 minutes past 10 on LBC. I'm Iain Dale, here with you until noon. Well, lots going on in the world of politics, lots going on in the world of security. The Sunday papers dominated by the reaction to those terrible events on Friday on London Bridge. Later in the programme, we'll be talking to the Security Minister, Brandon Lewis, and also the former Defence Secretary, Liam Fox. He'll be joining us at 11. Before then, I'm delighted to welcome Barry Gardiner to the studio, Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade and, of course, Labour candidate. You can watch us, by the way, on the LBC website, lbc.co.uk, the Facebook page, YouTube and Twitter. And we'll be taking your calls in roughly 15-20 minutes. So do stack up your calls over the next 15 minutes. 0345 6060 973. Barry, welcome. Let's start off with, obviously, the big issue that's concerning us all, the terrible, tragic events on Friday. Do you think they could have been foreseen?
Well, look, first of all, I think, let's say, just in thought about Jack Merritt and the other people who were injured and the woman who died. We only know the name of Jack Merritt, but obviously this young man was incredibly talented, a beautiful soul, and someone who reached out into what he saw as the margins of society to try and improve society. And I think, that's where we should start from, because people like him are so sorely needed in our world. And tragically, we've lost him. And the woman, we don't know who she is yet, but obviously her family must be in deep shock and grief. So I think, you're right. We do need to sort of ultimately, look for answers here. But in the first 48 hours, we're not going to get answers. All we can do is really begin to try and look and formulate what the questions might be, I think, at this stage.
Well, a lot of us, we want to try and understand what happened, why it happened, and how it could be prevented from happening again.
Yes.
But you've got the Sunday papers full of accusation and counter-accusation from politicians from different political parties. You've got the Sunday Times headline here. Boris vows to lock terrorists up and throw away the key. Corbyn accuses Tories over killer's release. Isn't it a bit soon for all of this?
Look, I'm really disappointed in the way in which the Prime Minister has come out and sort of tried to weaponise this, particularly when Jack Merritt's father has said it would be a travesty, given what Jack was campaigning for, a proper understanding of the role of prison and the role of rehabilitation. Because what Jack seems to have wanted to devote his life to was to saying, if we are going to keep society safe, and if we're going to live in a society where criminals are ultimately released back into society, then of course they must be punished. But at the same time, if they are coming back into society, they need to be made safe before they do. They need to be rehabilitated. And I think, to simply say, okay, we're just going to make people, I think the Prime Minister has said, we will go for 14-year fixed-term sentences and they'll serve every day. Well, the question then is, what happens on 14 years and 1 day? If these people are coming back into society without actually having been reformed, that's not a safe society.
Do you think it's possible to rehabilitate a terrorist?
Well, the question is, I think it may be possible to rehabilitate some, it may not be possible to rehabilitate others. And that's why the legislation that was introduced in 2005, the sentencing legislation there, I think it was the IPP, it was sort of indefinite legislation for public protection. And that meant that terrorists like this could be put away for an indeterminate length of time. You could have a minimum period, but it would be indeterminate how long they spent behind bars, because it would then depend on whether they had been rehabilitated or not.
That was superseded by legislation in 2008, wasn't it, which gave people an automatic right of release after serving half their sentence. And that seems to be the argument here, certainly yesterday on Twitter, between Priti Patel and Yvette Cooper. And Priti Patel was saying, well, your government introduced that, we changed it in 2013. But of course, this guy was sentenced before 2013.
No, look, that's right. Now, look, I don't want to get involved in the Twitter spat between Priti Patel and Yvette Cooper, but it seems to me that they were talking at cross purposes, because the IPP sentencing continued until 2012, when it was then ended. And it's perfectly true that in 2008, for other offences, my understanding is that there was then this half-life, as it were, but that was also changed under the coalition government to a 2/3 life so if you were serving 50 years...
But that didn't apply to Mr. Khan because he was already...
Absolutely.
Well, look, let's Boris... If you want to put your headphones on, Barry, Boris Johnson has just been addressing this issue in an interview with Andrew Marr, where he attacked what he called Labour's system of automatic release.
The problem was that this individual should have been in prison. And there was no question.
And under the Conservatives, he was let out. Under the Conservatives, he was let out. This was the Conservative decision.
Because of changes.
You've been in power for 10 years.
Because of changes to the law that were brought in by the Labour Party that I voted against.
You're in power for 10 years and you've done nothing about it in 10 years.
That Jeremy Corbyn voted in favour of.
For 10 years, you've done nothing about it.
He voted in favour of automatic early release.
For 10 years, you've done nothing about it.
You cannot retrospectively change the basis on which...
For 10 years, you have done nothing about it.
Sorry, that you cannot change the basis on which someone is sentenced.
Your reaction?
Well, quite simply, Andrew Marr's correct. If the government wanted to do something to change the legislation and to change the sentencing, they've had 10 years in which to do it. As I say, I don't want to get involved in a political spat here. I think it's unseemly when we're not even 48 hours away from these deaths. But I do think that it's appalling the way that the Prime Minister has tried to weaponise this as a political issue against the Labour Party, when they have been in government for 10 years and have had the opportunity to do whatever they wanted in terms of changing the legislation. And the report that Aitchison brought out in, I think it was ultimately in 2016, I think he wrote it in 2015.
This was a report by Iain Aitchison. He was a former prison governor, and he made 69 different recommendations to the Ministry of Justice.
Exactly.
This is all about how terrorist prisoners should be treated, what should happen to them when they came out. Michael Gove, as Secretary of State for Justice, he accepted 68 of them.
Yes.
Liz Truss took over.
Yeah.
3 of them have been implemented.
Well, indeed. And, so, as I say, we're too close to these events, I think, to say we now know definitively what's happened. But there are clearly questions to answer when the Aitchison report, which was accepted, as you say, almost in full, was then rejected by the succeeding Secretary of State. I think the number of recommendations that she accepted was not 68, but 8, and only 3 of those have been implemented,
Correct.
None of which relate to the parole board or the role of the parole board.
Do you think that we ought to completely... I mean, it's always difficult in the aftermath of a terror event to have knee-jerk policies and say, well, this would solve, but this would prevent any further terror attack. Frankly, no legislation can prevent every terror attack.
Quite right.
But do you think, as a matter of principle now, a lot of people are going to think that terrorists should serve the full term sentence and there shouldn't be any automatic right to release after 50% or even 2/3. If they're sentenced to 16 years, they should serve 16 years.
Look,
on the basis that if they're in prison, they can't do a terror attack.
Indeed. Let me answer that in a slightly tangential way, and I'm not trying to dodge the question here. The reason why there are reduced sentences, or criminals serve reduced periods from the actual sentence, is so that there is an incentive for them to reform their behaviour and to submit to reform whilst in prison. So it's if you behave well in prison, you show that you're a reformed character, you show that you've engaged in rehabilitation, and therefore that's the incentive for them to do that, is that they have a reduced time in prison.
Which presumably Mr. Khan did.
Indeed. And I think actually his was automatic, as we said earlier, rather than...
No, but I think even if it's automatic, there are provisions to extend it if there is a threat.
But in his case, my understanding is that the parole board had no role whatsoever, so they did not look at the situation.
Let's broaden this out a little bit, because obviously we've got the NATO summit next week, so security issues are going to be to the fore during the election campaign, even if this terror attack hadn't happened. Now, there's a poll in the Sunday Times today which asks, how confident are you in Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn to look after the nation's security? Now, Boris Johnson's rating is 44% are and 44% aren't, so there's a net rating of 0. In Jeremy Corbyn's case, only 21% are confident that he would look after the nation's security. 67% are not. That is a real problem, isn't it?
Look, of course, I think there is a problem in that perception, because I don't think it's correct. I think it's a very different way of leadership and looking at security that Jeremy has to Boris Johnson. When you're looking at somebody like Boris Johnson, he's come out, within 24 hours of these events happening, saying, I'm going to lock people up and throw away the key. It's a knee-jerk response, and it's a response. And what Jeremy has always tried to do is to look at not just what you do after something like this, but what you do before it, how you engage with people, how you try and avoid getting into the situations where these things manifest themselves. So it's about creating a securer world through things like justice and equality and human rights, and campaigning for those across the globe.
But the problem,
because, of course, the things that create a lack of security very often are people's perceptions of unfairness and inequality.
But the problem that Jeremy Corbyn has is that some people have a perception of him as the terrorist friend, don't they? Because of his associations with the IRA, with Hamas, Hezbollah and all the rest of it. Now, you can say, well, this is ridiculous. All he was doing was trying to bring about peace. But that is the perception that a lot of people have.
Yes, but it doesn't mean the perception is correct. And as you say, it wasn't just Jeremy Corbyn who was talking to the IRA. So was John Major. So were all our senior security people in those days.
He was talking to the other side as well, which I don't think Jeremy Corbyn ever met people from the other side.
Well, I'm not sure that that's true. But look, the point is, in reaching out to people, you try and create a common space for dialogue and then political resolution. And that's what Jeremy's done throughout all his life.
People also were asked, how important is Britain's membership of NATO? 72% say it's important, 7% say it isn't. How important are nuclear weapons to our security? 57% say they are, 24% say they don't. And again, Jeremy Corbyn has always been sceptical about NATO. At one point he said we should withdraw from it. That's not Labour Party policy now.
No, indeed, he was on the radio, on the Sophie Ridge programme this morning, and he said, look, NATO was an essential part of our defence structures.
But people know that he hasn't always believed that. And similarly with nuclear weapons, you've got Trident in your manifesto, and yet everybody knows that, well, Jeremy Corbyn said he would never press the button, so he's completely obliterated our nuclear deterrent, hasn't he? Because it's only a deterrent if the other side thinks that you might use it.
Look, if you look at countries like Germany, like Italy, like Japan, they have no nuclear capacity at all. They don't feel unsafe as a result of not having that. Jeremy has said, and our Labour Party manifesto is very clear, that we believe that the point of having nuclear weapons is, first of all, as a deterrent, but then in order to try and engage positively in the multilateral talks for disarmament. And that seems to have been put on the back burner. People nowadays are not talking about trying to reduce these weapons, as even Ronald Reagan was in 20 odd years ago, well, more than that actually, 30 odd years ago. We need to actually try and create a world in which these weapons are not being stored up.
Would you like to see the elimination of nuclear weapons? Because a lot of people...
You can't uninvent them.
Well, exactly.
You can't uninvent them.
Exactly. So what is the level that each side should have where they think, well, OK, if we use these, the other side would respond? Or because, I'm sure Jeremy Corbyn would like to see the total elimination of nuclear weapons.
Look, the point is, as I say, you can't uninvent these weapons. They exist. And it's always, therefore, possible that a rogue state would develop them, and that would be deeply unsatisfactory. And indeed, it's happened in the past, and what we see with Iran may be a way of it, precipitating itself in the future. So it is important that we understand that they exist, and that we then have to deal with that. But I think what we need is a minimum level that gives that deterrence factor, not the constant escalation of these weapons to outdo each other and to gain military advantage. And that's the trouble. It's become an escalation upwards rather than a de-escalation to a point of minimum deterrence.
What's happened to Diane Abbott and Emily Thornberry and Keir Starmer during this election campaign? Because we haven't seen a sight nor sound of them. You'd have thought Diane Abbott might have been out talking about the terror attack, but she hasn't. You'd have thought Keir Starmer would be out talking about Brexit, given this is supposed to be the Brexit election. But we hear that he and Emily Thornberry have been silenced because they don't want to sign up to Jeremy Corbyn's policy on this.
Well, look, I've been out around the country. I know
we hear a lot from you.
I've been...
that's a very good thing too. But why aren't we hearing from these three big beasts of the Labour jungle?
Look, I've been where Diane's been giving speeches. I've been on the same platform as her, so I know that she's been doing that around the country. She hasn't done a single
interview in this campaign.
What, a media interview?
Yeah. Not one, nor Keir Starmer, nor Emily Thornberry.
Well, look, you need to do what you do with me, and you need to give them a call and say, come on, why aren't you coming on?
Believe me, we do. Emily Thornberry was supposed to be doing an hour with us last Tuesday and was pulled by Labour HQ, which... Anyway, now let's move on to tax, because this has been a big dividing line of the campaign. Can you admit now that there will be people in the bottom 95% who will be paying more tax under Labour? Because that was the promise of the manifesto, that no one would. But we now know that's not true, don't we?
Their tax rate will not go up. That is true.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true that if you are earning less than, if you're in the 95% rather than the 5% of the population, you will not be paying a higher rate of tax. That is what we've promised. The only way in which you can make the charge that you're making stick is by talking about the marriage tax allowance, which is an allowance against the rate of tax.
But that does mean people will be paying more income tax.
Absolutely, I'm not ducking it at all. It means
and
that
pensioners who are on £20,000 a year will be paying more.
If I can just say, they will be paying more as a result of the marriage tax allowance, but they will also be paying more because they will have higher wages. So, for example, in the public sector, they will be getting a 5% immediate pay rise. So if you're a nurse, if you're a policeman, if you're any of the public services, you get a 5% pay rise. Now, nobody's saying, oh gosh, look, under Labour you will be paying more tax because you'll be earning more.
But if you're in the private sector, you won't be getting a 5% rise, will you?
No, indeed. But my point to you is to say that we're paying more tax because of an equalisation of a policy between those who are married and those who are in civil partnerships.
But my point is, we were assured in the campaign launch that no one would be paying more income tax, if you were earning less than £80,000 a year. And that's not true, is it?
The phrasing should have been that nobody will have a higher rate of tax, and certainly even those people will not be worse off, because if you look at the policies, even if you simply look at the policies on energy, that would be saving the average family £417, which would more than offset the £250. But also, if you then add into that our policies on childcare, That's up to £5,000. People would be better off on that, as well as what I've already said, the 5% increase for public sector workers, and, of course, the living wage, which is going to take many people who are being badly paid at the moment up to a decent level. So I think, on the whole, I don't think there are going to be people who are worse off, but you can make that very limited charge stick, I accept.
OK, well, I'm glad you say that, because not John McDonnell, to be fair to him, he has admitted that now, but very few other Labour politicians
Can I just say, I don't think we were trying to mislead. What we were trying to do is to get over the generality of the fact that nobody would be paying a higher rate of tax.
I think, look, I've got lots of more questions on different subjects that I could ask you, but I think we should go to our listeners now and see what their priorities are. Matt's in Northampton. Hi, Matt. What would you like to ask Barry?
Yes, good morning, Ian. Good morning, Barry. Just a question, really, in relation to Friday, a few weeks ago, in relation to the American incident with the leader of ISIS and Mr. Corbyn's comments. Does Barry and the rest of his shadow front bench believe that the action taken by the Met Police on Friday was the right one?
Absolutely. And I think, we should be praising the police for the way in which they did respond. They responded swiftly. The off-duty policeman, I understand, also, weighed in, and I believe was the person who at least disarmed the man of one of the knives. Yep. So they behaved absolutely impeccably. And of course, in shooting the Usman Khan, they were acting to save the public, and it was the right thing to do in those circumstances. Absolutely.
And Jeremy Corbyn has said the same thing on Sophie Ridge this morning. Absolutely. But why I think Matt is slightly bemused by the fact that Jeremy Corbyn did not think that was the right thing for the Americans to do with al-Baghdadi, but does think it's the right thing to do in these circumstances.
No, I look, they're very different circumstances, and I think our presumption in any country where we are ruled by the rule of law should be that if it is possible to arrest and put somebody on trial for crimes, then that is how it should be done. Summary justice executed in the moment.
But that wasn't summary justice with al-Baghdadi, was it?
Well, it was. I think it was done at the time. In fact, he blew himself up.
Exactly. So I mean, he was wearing a vest just as Usman Khan was wearing a vest. Right. So, and yet the Americans didn't actually shoot him. He blew himself up.
It wasn't possible.
That's why I think a lot of people thought that was a very strange comment for Jeremy Corbyn to make.
Well, look, it
was laced with anti-Americanism, wasn't it?
I'm not going to get into anti-Americanism. Look, America has been a strong ally of the United Kingdom. I have many disagreements with the current administration in America and the current American president. But
the problem is with Jeremy Corbyn, his default reaction seems to be, well, if America says this is what should happen, I'll think the opposite. I mean, I can't think of a single occasion ever where he's supported American action on anything. I'm sure you have.
Look, I'm not privy to all the votes that Jeremy has supported or not. So we're going into the realms of speculation.
Okay. All right.
But as to Max's question, I think there is no dispute. The police acted impeccably in this occasion. They acted swiftly. They acted decisively. They kept the public safe. It was the right thing to do.
Let's go to James in South Woodford. James, what's your question, please?
Good morning, Barry.
Good morning.
I need to know what makes Labour think that they'll be able to conclude the trade agreement, which you'll have to do post the referendum you'll run, in less than the multi-year process you claim it will take the Conservatives. That's assuming the country votes to leave again. Or do you plan that the Leave result will be a Remain, so you'll never have to get to that point? Because I don't understand how you claim it'll take them 12 years, but you never mention how long it'll take you. It's always the country can decide, and that's it.
No,
how long will it take you?
Right. The difference, of course, is this, that what the Conservatives are proposing is that we should leave in a way that then requires us to conclude a full-blown free trade agreement and a full-blown security agreement. That's not how we're proposing to leave. So the outline of the credible deal that we have already discussed, obviously with people in the European Union, is one in which we would have a much closer relationship. We would be leaving the European Union, but we would be having a customs union relationship with them.
So we wouldn't be negotiating a trade deal, essentially, would we?
Yeah, that's right. So that's part of what we're negotiating at that point. And we know, because it is something that the Europeans themselves would like to see. Indeed, it's something that the current Prime Minister's deal has offered for Northern Ireland, that sort of relationship with the rest of European Union. But of course, that's one of the problems with that, because it does build that border down the Irish Sea, which rips apart the different elements of the United Kingdom.
But just on the timetabling, what you're promising is to renegotiate a deal with the EU, a withdrawal deal, within 3 months of taking power, and then within 6 months of taking power, you'll have a referendum. That's fantasy, isn't it? Because just the legislative time and the time that the Electoral Commission need to organise a referendum, it can't be done within 6 months.
No, actually, it can be done within 6 months. That is possible, and that's why we've set that time frame. And actually, we believe that the outline of the deal that we want to conclude, it's been gone over so many times with the European Union, and indeed they wanted various elements of that. It was Theresa May's refusal to breach her own sort of rigid rules, her red lines, that meant that instead of moving to something that would have been much more obviously beneficial to our manufacturing industry in this country, that we didn't do that.
Well, I accept that it's possible to do a deal within 3 months. What I can't accept is that it's possible to do a referendum within 6 months, because the Electoral Commission, just on their own, need 14 weeks, apparently, to organise it and settle the question. And before that, you have to have an Act of Parliament. Well, unless Labour has an overwhelming majority, I mean, you can see the parliamentary diversions that there would be to get that through Parliament. It's just not possible within 6 months. Why not be honest about that?
No, look, I really do disagree with you, and I'm not just adopting a position, Ian. I think it is possible. Now, of course, you put in the thing was that would make it very difficult is, well, no parliamentary majority. Of course, that then complicates it in the way that the previous Parliament has been complicated. But look, let's be clear. The Tories had 3 years to do what they promised. They failed to do it. We've set out a timetable that we do think is absolutely realistic, both to achieve the revised deal, because it's been gone over so many times. We know what the structure and the outline of it is, and we believe it is possible to do it within 6 months.
And you said that even if there is a more advantageous deal that you negotiate, you would support Remain in that referendum, I believe. So if you could say that, why can't your leader decide which side he would come down on?
Two things. And, I have to say that I'm always torn between, democracy and economy on this, which is why I believe it is right to put it back to the people in this second referendum.
You didn't used to believe that, did you?
No, I didn't. You're right. But that was before our country was torn apart.
But how would a second referendum bring the country back together?
It will do, I think, in that it will give a definitive result on the final shape of the deal. I come from a union background. I joined the union before I joined the Labour Party, and the way we do things in a union is very simple. What you do is you say, are you happy with the situation? If not, are you prepared to go on strike? And you take a vote for strike action. Then what you do is you negotiate a deal. And then you come back to your membership and you say, OK, now you can see what we've managed to negotiate. Do you still want to go on strike, or are you happy to accept the negotiated package? Well, what we're saying at this stage is we'll negotiate the package. You've given us the instruction to strike. You've told us that you can leave the European Union. Now let's negotiate the package.
So do
let's
you
go back
accept
to the
that
members.
if Boris Johnson does get a majority in this election, which I know obviously you hope he doesn't, but if he does, do you not accept that is a mandate for him to go ahead with his withdrawal agreement and then negotiate a free trade agreement after that?
Ian, what I think about it doesn't matter. He'll have a majority. And and he'll do, I'm sure, what he will.
I'm sure that's...
I won't be happy about it, and you wouldn't expect
you to. Right, we'll have some more questions for Barry Gardiner in just a moment. Let's just get the latest LBC News headlines with Philip Chryssikos.
Jeremy Corbyn says convicted terrorists should not necessarily serve their full prison sentences automatically. Following last Friday's London Bridge terror attack, the Labour leader's words come after the Conservatives' Boris Johnson said violent offenders must serve every day of their sentence with no exceptions. 2 people died when a convicted terrorist who served half his sentence was released early on licence. But the Liberal Democrats are accusing the Conservatives of politicising the situation. 2 RAF fighter jets have intercepted a plane in the early hours of this morning after it lost communication in UK airspace. Travelling faster than the speed of sound, the Typhoons caused a sonic boom heard across Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Essex, Hertfordshire and London at around 4:20. The way Google collects its users' data is being investigated by European Union officials. The focus is how the company makes its money. LBC weather, scattered showers in the far north and east, cold and sunny elsewhere, a high of 8 degrees.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
10:32 is the time on LBC. Coming up in about 15 minutes, the Security Minister, Brandon Lewis, will be joining me to talk about the London terror attack. Barry Gardiner is here with me, Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade. You can watch us on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, the YouTube channel, Facebook page or Twitter feed. Next call from Tony, who's in Camden. Hello, Tony.
Yeah, hi Iain, hi Barry. I'm a lifelong member of the Labour Party. I have been since I was able to vote, and I've liked a lot of things that Jeremy Corbyn has stood for in the past. I personally have been a huge critic of Israel in the past. I have many Jewish friends, members of my family are half Israeli. But watching that interview with Andrew Neil last week, and watching and to be fair, I mean, I don't, Jeremy Corbyn saying that he stood up for racism.
Tony, I need your question.
Well, my question is why can't Jeremy Corbyn apologise to the Jewish people, the Jewish community, for this anti-Semitism that is clear, that is evident in the Labour Party or around it or surrounding it, because you are going to lose voters like myself.
Barry.
Well, Tony, look, thanks for your question, and I hope we don't lose you. That's the first thing I want to say, because obviously you're somebody who does believe in Labour's values and many of the policies that we're putting forward in this manifesto. Why didn't he apologise? He has.
But he didn't then, did he?
He didn't then.
4 opportunities.
I'll address that. But I do want to make it clear. He has apologised. He put out a video in which he said how sorry he was for the deep hurt that had been caused to the Jewish community by the party's failure to tackle this much quicker and more decisively.
So why didn't he say that to Andrew Neil?
And I think...
it's very easy to make a video, isn't it? Because you're reading from an auto cue screen, so you've got your words in front of you to read.
He's done it on other occasions as well, Iain. But
that makes it worse.
Look, I can't tell you why he didn't apologise on that occasion. What I do see him trying to do there is trying to explain that we have taken steps to improve the situation, really important steps. And that's what he was trying to get across by doubling the number of lawyers who deal with these cases, by speeding up the number of cases fourfold, by making sure that these expulsions happen. When he became the leader of the party, there was no system for dealing with this. He's put a system in place. He's ensured that...
But there wasn't a problem before he became leader.
No, that's not
the
true.
problem.
No, Iain, sorry, you're wrong. Because actually, half of all the cases, the outstanding cases in 2016, predated Jeremy being a member of the party. They were lagging over. Sorry, not a member. Being the leader of the party.
They're generally by people who weren't members of the Labour Party before that. Then they became members of the party when he became leader.
I'm sorry, that's not the case.
But there's always been this anti-Semitism in the hard left, hasn't there?
Let me just establish the fact, okay? And the fact is that of the outstanding cases in 2016, more than half of those cases related to the period before Jeremy became the leader of the party. Now, we didn't deal with them quickly enough, and there wasn't a process to deal with them quickly enough. He's now changed that, and that's important. But what you talk about as this being an issue on the left of politics, actually reports have shown and studies have shown that it is a greater problem on the right of society. And actually they've also done an analysis of Conservative voters versus Labour voters, where anti-Semitism is more prevalent amongst Conservative voters than Labour voters. But we are looking at a mass party. We've got over 500,000,
I've heard
and
all
it's
of these
less than
arguments before,
0.1% of our
that's
membership.
A fair point to make.
But that's less than the number of anti-Semites in the population.
When the leader of the
as a whole.
party can't apologise for it, even though he has done before, when he can't even say that all of the sort of Rothschild thing, the tropes that come out, well, he can't even say that they're anti-Semitic in the same interview, that will lead British Jews to think that he's not on their side.
Well, look, that's wrong. And what he's done is put in process education programs both within the party. In our manifesto, it's clear that we want education programs in schools, not simply, general programs of education, but education programs about anti-Semitism, about Islamophobia, teaching children about equality from a very early age, teaching people to respect one another. And those are the positive steps that he has implemented.
We've only got time for two more questions. So let's go to Tarquin. Oh, he's gone. Let's go to James in Merthyr Tydfil. Hello, James.
Hi, Ian. Hiya, Barry. Borough from Wales. Barry, I got a question for you. You know, as a Labour supporter and a Labour voter for all of my life, for you to turn around to me and tell me you're going to get me back into the Labour Party by offering me a referendum on a choice between Remain Light and Remain, how stupid do you take us for? You take us for utter idiots, don't you, Barry?
Well, borrowed out to you too. But look, what we're looking at is...
You're going against the vote that we voted for Barry.
No.
Come out and say it.
You remember what was on that ballot paper? It was whether we
leave
should...
or remain.
Exactly.
Quite simple, Barry.
And what it didn't say is how we would leave. And what we've been struggling over the past 3 years, and what the Conservatives have been unable even to agree amongst themselves, so much so that they've thrown 21 of their own people out the party, right? Is how we should leave. How we should leave. Now, some people want to leave in the most right-wing way possible.
It's not right-wing.
Well, it's just leaving.
So you're telling me I'm right-wing, Barry? Are you telling me I'm right-wing?
No.
I voted Labour all my life, and I'm a right-wing person. This is why we in South Wales are going to give you a massive wake-up call on December the 12th. You are going to realise South Wales is like Scotland. You've took us for granted and you take us for fools.
Well, I've never taken anybody for granted. I've never taken any vote for granted. I think we must always try and listen to people's concerns and address them. But what the referendum decided was that people wanted to leave. What wasn't decided was how we should, and that's what Parliament's been arguing about.
But you're not going to offer a choice in this referendum, are you? You're going to offer, as James says, a choice between Remain and Remain Light.
No, it's not Remain Light.
Well, it is. You're staying in the single market. You're staying in the customs union.
If you don't have any representation in the European Union, if you're no longer bound by the two treaties of the European Union, that means you're not a member of the European Union, and that's what we voted on.
Should
if you remember back to the referendum,
should you not offer a proper Brexit on the referendum as well?
May just make this point. If you remember back to the referendum, when Nigel Farage was saying, "Look at Norway, look at Switzerland."
Stop mentioning Nigel Farage and Hannah. They are not members of the government. They're not MPs. You are trying to go against what we voted for. Don't waffle, Barry. Come out and say it. You want us to remain, and you want to stab the people in South Wales in the back.
Absolutely
like you've done to Scotland, like you've done to the North.
No, absolutely not. What we're trying to do is to offer people a way in which, yes, they can leave if they want to, but without destroying jobs and our economy, and without ignoring the wishes of the other half of the population.
But you could easily satisfy James, I think, by saying we'll have a Leave versus Remain referendum. We'll rerun the first one, actually, so we can see how people's views have changed or not. And then if Remain win, well, we all know what that means. But then if Leave wins, then you have a secondary question. Deal or Labour's, no deal or Labour's deal. And then I think that would satisfy James.
No, sorry, at the time of the referendum, nobody ever talked about no deal.
Yes, they did.
No.
David Cameron did. He said, if we don't leave with a deal, we leave under WTO terms. I can play you the video.
Sorry, you're right. You're right. But what he was saying when he was saying that, and let's look at the implication of what he was saying. He was saying that would be disastrous. He said if we don't leave with the deal, we would. Yeah. That was simply the default position.
But people have a right to.
That was going off the cliff edge.
Anyway, I mean, James there has articulated Labour's problem in this election, not only in South Wales but in the Midlands and the North. And judging by that YouGov poll on Wednesday, I mean, that is where Boris Johnson would get his majority from.
Well, look, if you look at what's been happening in the polls have been narrowing over the past few weeks.
True.
They've narrowed greatly this last week, down in some polls down to 6 points. I hope they will halve again in the next week, and ultimately we will be in a position where we can win this election. But we'll do it by, Iain, by trying to answer your question straight, and I'm not trying to duck his question. I've taken it on board. I understand he disagrees with me, but what he has to understand is that he, in disagreeing with half of his fellow citizens, we're faced with two extremes. Some people want one, some people want the other. We're trying to negotiate a way through to bring the country back together.
Quick final question from Tarquin, who's in Sutton. Very quickly, if you can, Tarquin.
Yes, hi. Hi, Barry. I'm confused with your tax policy. You say that only the top 5% will pay any additional monies in tax, but that's not true, is it?
Well, we've covered that one before.
Yes, I wasn't listening to the show previously.
I thought you were going to ask about inheritance tax.
Yes,
Tarquin.
I'm leading on to that because it's very specific.
Can you get on with it? I did ask you to ask a quick question.
Okay. The John McDonnell has announced that he wishes to abolish inheritance tax and replace it with a lifetime gift tax of $125,000. Do you think that's an equal and fair society?
I think you'll find that's not in the Grey Book, which is our manifesto commitments about our spending, the resource expenditure and the annually managed expenditure, which we'll put forward. These are things which have been talked about, but they're not actually...
So inheritance tax will stay exactly the same as it is for the moment, at least?
It will be exactly as set out in the Grey Book.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Barry. That's all we have time for. Thank you very much for coming in and spending some of your Sunday morning with us. I'm sure you're going to be out on the knocker.
I certainly am.
Now, as they say. That's Barry Gardiner, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade. You'll be able to catch up on that interview on the Cross Question podcast feed a little bit later, and also it's available now on the LBC YouTube channel. It's coming up to 10:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast, LBC.
There is this concern among listeners that the NHS is for sale.